Hi, I'm Lady Genevieve, and I would like to know why the men who made Superbad as an autobiographical coming of age film about themselves thought that they were the right ones to give a voice to Pamela Anderson's personal trauma. Today's video is a review of the new Hulu series, Pam and Tommy. I got press screeners for the series, I binged it, and the embargo has now lifted, so press are free to share our reviews. I don't know how much or how little would be considered spoilers since the events played out in this show are based on a true story. Me talking about what's in the show isn't that far removed from Googling articles about what actually happened. But if you really don't want specific discussions of the show's material and the way that it handles the subject matter, then this review probably won't be right for you. I will give you that fair warning in advance. I have a lot of issues with the way this story was told, and there's really no way for me to explain my issues with it without getting into a certain amount of spoilers, so I would advise you to proceed at your own discretion. If you were living under a rock in the 1990s, or you are a Gen Z viewer who has not read up on pop culture history, Pam and Tommy is addressing a very famous scandal in which actress and model Pamela Anderson and her at the time new husband, Motley Crue drummer Tommy Lee, filmed an adult video together on their honeymoon. The video was stolen and distributed without their permission, first on physical video, because this is back when VHS tapes were still a thing, and eventually on the World Wide Web. This show has been getting a ton of attention because Lily James and Sebastian Stan are both pretty popular in their own rights. They have a lot of adoring fans who like to see what new projects they are getting up to, and the marketing for the series has also leaned very heavily into the aesthetics of the physical transformation for both of the actors. For Lily, there is the hair and makeup artist, all of these artists who have done incredible work to make her face and general appearance look more like Pamela Anderson. It's pretty incredible work to look at, and you cannot help but respect the craftsmanship of the people who did those behind the scenes jobs. Then for Sebastian, there is this striking transformation of dyeing his hair black, having the fake piercings and the fake tattoos. That on its own is fine. I have no issues with it. But where the marketing started to put me off was when they were having these two performers recreate photos, one in particular that I will not show in this video just because I'm paranoid that YouTube would ding me for it. And the only thing I could think when I saw it was, oh, was this before or after that man was arrested and convicted of spousal abuse against Pamela? I certainly don't deny that the story of what happened to the real Pamela and Tommy is compelling. It got a lot of attention, and it was in many ways a ground zero of sorts for a lot of unpleasant things that would rise to greater prominence in their wake, both in celebrity pop culture, the larger mass culture, and also was further exacerbated by the advancements in technology that would follow. There was the commodification of the celebrity sex tape, a general increase in violation of privacy for both celebrities and non-celebrities alike, the rise of revenge porn, sexting and leaks of sexting. The list goes on and on. If your interest in this series stems from your interest and admiration for Lily James or Sebastian Stan as performers, I can absolutely understand why you would be curious and interested in the series, but for me, this show is a complete misfire in the context of offering a meaningful exploration of the relevant issues of the material in any way that could have effectively justified the show's existence, and that is not the fault of Lily James or Sebastian Stan. Lily and Sebastian are actors. They are not writers of the show. They are not directors, producers, showrunners, nor are they the developers of this series. Lily and Sebastian were given scripts, they came to set, they got made over, and they played these characters to the best of their abilities based on what was given to them in those scripts. The actors are not the issue. Lily and Sebastian did their best based on what they were given, and I cannot and do not fault either one of them for that. It just goes to show that I'm better off going and watching the Mamma Mia sequel as a palate cleanser. I would also happily watch The Covenant for fun before I would ever go anywhere near this, presuming that I'm looking for an enjoyable viewing experience. I'm probably one of the few people on YouTube that has made a video on The Covenant and did not just say that it was terrible the whole time. I liked the potential of that film's concept, but that's a conversation I've already had. And I would most certainly much rather watch Pam and Tommy than I would a terrible propaganda film that attempts to spread revisionist political history, but we're not talking about that box office flop today. Going back to Pam and Tommy, fundamentally, it is baffling to have chosen to make this show at all, when if you were intending to tell this story and do an exploration of the larger cultural and sociological ramifications of what happened to the real Pamela and Tommy, but mostly Pamela, you would have been much better off doing so, utilizing the documentary medium instead of a scripted dramatic narrative. If you look at the show's Wikipedia page, you will see one of the listed genres as black comedy, which is another way of saying dark comedy or morbid humor. And right there, we are already getting into a problem. You only have 8 episodes. You should be focusing a lot more deeply into the larger cultural issues of the era and how they connect to similar issues present in today's world. You should also be focusing far more on just Pamela than you actually ended up doing in this show. The show offers the absolute most superficial commentary about what she went through. The show presents the experience as being difficult, and yeah, we know it was difficult. Is that all the insight you have to offer? Why was this show made? You want to let me know that misogyny exists? That's it? Can you dig a little deeper, please? This should have been a horror movie or a horror series. We have these giant celebrity iCloud leaks today because of hackers, and that's happened more than once, by the way. And you don't want to make any sort of connection to how this incident in the mid-90s foreshadowed the deeply insidious surveillance state that would rise to prominence in the next decade and onward. It's an entirely missed opportunity and a misfire on the part of the writing and the producing. And I suppose the developing as well. This show was developed by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. These two have done a ton of projects together, the majority of which are comedies. Films like Superbad, Pineapple Express, This Is the End, and Sausage Party. If you were insisting on doing the story as a scripted series instead of just offering a more direct and thorough retelling through a documentary, this should have stayed firmly in the genre of not only drama, but I would have pushed it even further into being a socio-political horror film. Think like Black Mirror, but even more intense. That would have had a much better chance of gripping me as a viewer. There are times Seth and Evan have collaborated as producers on projects that do have drama and address serious issues, but also infuse comedy when it's appropriate to do so. Shows like Preacher or The Boys, both of which I enjoyed watching tremendously. I have zero interest in you finding humor in Pamela and Tommy's relationship, let alone that whole ordeal that she experienced. This show puts so much airtime on Seth Rogen's character, Rand, and it ends up only jumbling the show and splitting the focus far too much. I understand that if you were to just go online and read a quick synopsis of what happened to lead up to the real Rand stealing the safe, and then him leaking the tape, not making real money from leaking it, so he ended up in debt to the mafia, it sounds very dramatic, and then you think, why not use that drama for a fictional narrative? That doesn't mean that I have any interest in watching a scripted narrative rehashing the horrific trauma that Pamela Anderson experienced, in which you also try to make me sympathetic to the man that was directly responsible for leaking the tape and inciting that trauma of hers. One important point to note about this show's development is the total lack of involvement of the real Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee in creating it. Entertainment Tonight got a quote from Tommy Lee when they asked him about the show, and he said, "I know Sebastian, he's playing me. From what he's told me, really beautiful story. I think a lot of people would think it's one thing, but it's really about privacy and how things got crazy then. There's different laws now." This is exactly my point, though. The show is so stuck on this very superficial presentation of how misogyny and sexism exist, and they make so much of the drama for fictional Pamela about that, and yet they don't do nearly enough to address the fact that No matter who this could have happened to, there was a lack of legal infrastructure because as technology advances at an exponential rate, the legislative process scrambles, struggles, and fails to keep up in a timely manner. That's why when you are the first one to experience something horrific like this, and it's something that intersects with rapidly evolving technology, you are dealing with the Wild West, if you'll pardon the unfortunate expression. Now, despite the fact that there is a verified quote from the real Tommy about the show in which he's not particularly negative about the show's existence, the only quotes that seem to be floating around currently about Pamela's response to the show are ones that have been posted in tabloids from anonymous sources, so I don't really want to read them because that's not quite enough for my liking. I would much rather see video proof of her saying something about it, also without any sneaky editing, before I will confirm the legitimacy of her making a public opinion of the show. To make a long story short, though, in case you were wondering, the quote floating around is claiming that she does not approve of the show. Regardless of whether or not that particular source is legitimate, though, I would make the argument that the lack of a concrete quote from her is very damning. It is incredibly baffling that the show seems to be trying to convey to the audience that it was very bad what happened to Pamela and how the whole spectacle of it all, the sensationalizing of it, was damaging to her physical, emotional, and mental health. It did damage to her professional career. And then you decide to make a show dramatizing and sensationalizing what happened to her, thus turning it into a spectacle all over again, with these recreations of salacious photos of her and Tommy to be blasted all over the internet for marketing purposes. The lack of self-awareness is astonishing. I also don't think the show does anywhere near enough to do Pamela justice as a three-dimensional human being. Again, I have to make it very clear that my issues with the Pamela material are not in any way a criticism of Lily James as a performer. Lily did not write the scripts. The show is written in such a way that Pamela is presented as being a kind person, a person without malice, a person with good intentions, all perfectly good qualities to have, sure, but there are greater depths and nuances to who Pamela Anderson is as a person than what I think was presented in this show. If you watch even just a couple of Pamela Anderson's interviews, you can pick up on it very quickly. She has become increasingly involved in numerous causes over the years, including, but not limited to, being one of the only Hollywood celebrities to call for the release of Julian Assange, who is currently being imprisoned and tortured by powerful people who are angry that he helped to expose their war crimes. You could have put anything in to the writing to tap into that socially conscious side of her, but instead you wanted me to know that she likes The King and I, and you need to have a scene that goes on for far too long of her singing one of the songs from The King and I to her husband, Tommy Lee. I also have a real issue with how much energy the show puts into hypersexualizing these two as individuals and as a couple. Typically, I don't have a problem with salacious material being integrated into entertainment media, but it does not sit right with me that you give so much airtime into this idea of, well, they used to be a cute couple, passionately in love with each other, and then you wait until literally the last 10 minutes of the final episode to finally start to hint at what Tommy would end up doing to Pamela in real life. I don't know all of who will be tuning in to this review, so in case you don't know what happened, I will read a couple of lines from a Los Angeles Times article from 1998 that reported on the case. Rock star Tommy Lee was sentenced to 6 months in Los Angeles County Jail for battering his wife, actress Pamela Anderson Lee, and was warned that any violation of his subsequent probation will land him in state prison for 3 years. Malibu Municipal Judge Lawrence J. Mita said he hoped that counseling would teach the tattooed Motley Crue drummer to solve problems without violence, and that jail time would convince him to stick to the many conditions of his 3-year probation. Lee pleaded no contest last month to a felony charge of spousal battery. What I see here is a very clear, very disturbing, in my judgment, pattern of conduct in which otherwise resolvable matters are handled by violence, Mira said. You do it whether it's a family member or a third party. That's intolerable in any kind of civilized society. If we scroll down further in that article, it further states, before sentencing, Deputy District Attorney Kathy Solorzano described for the court the February 24th altercation that left Pamela Lee with bruises, a torn fingernail, and fear for the safety of her two sons, Dylan and Brandon. Lee assaulted his wife, who was holding their infant son, after she refused to call her parents and ask them not to come over to the couple's home, Solorzano said. If you wanted to establish to the audience that these two had a whirlwind romance where they got married after only knowing each other for a couple of days, you could have montaged that quickly and jumped into the more important material, which is all of the stuff to do with the tape being leaked to the masses, the personal trauma, and the larger cultural ramifications of what happened. Instead, they take their sweet time getting to the more important thing an otherwise unfamiliar audience should be informed of, the convicted felony charge of spousal battery, which only gets info dumped in the lines of text that flash up at the end of the final episode right before the credits roll. Info dumping, by the way, in text form screens at the end is customary with any sort of biopic or biopic adjacent premise. Imagine if they had the gall to do a movie about the Britney and Justin relationship from the 1990s and wasted 95% of the airtime going, well, they were all right when they were actually dating, and then finally let people know in the last 5% of the airtime, but actually he's a terrible person who spent years trashing her name and profiting off of it to boost his own music career. Again, I have to ask, why was this show made? And even more than that, why was it done with this approach? I have a lot more detailed issues with the execution of the show's material and how it addresses certain subject matter, so I am debating doing weekly reviews of the episodes so I can go through them more thoroughly as they air, as well as any of the good parts along the way too. I'm more than happy to give credit where credit is due, but I wanted to just present some of the larger points of feedback for an initial review as the embargo has now been lifted. If you have followed along with my Defending Jacob reviews or my Dickinson reviews, you will already know that if I commit to covering a show on a weekly basis and I have press screeners, I will give you spoiler-free reviews of episodes before they air, in addition to the spoiler reviews and discussions that I post when new episodes drop. But just so I don't leave you, the audience, thinking that I'm just being mean and I have nothing nice to say, even though I think I was very clear and fair about reminding people that the larger issues I have with the show are not the direct result of Lily James or Sebastian Stan. It's neither of their fault. I want to say one or two additional nice things. Admittedly, they're smaller points of feedback, but I do have them. There are some bops in the show's soundtrack. I'll admit, I was sometimes getting annoyed by this because I would go, why are you putting in a bop this good in this show that I have fundamental issues with? But how can I ever be mad in the heat of the moment when you're playing songs like Everybody Wants to Rule the World by Tears for Fears, or Love Fool Say That You Love Me by the Cardigans, or More Than This by Roxy Music, or What's Up by Four Non-Blondes? I don't know how smart it was for you to choose songs to play that would invoke recollections of exquisite art like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, or Rian Johnson's Knives Out, or the Wachowskis' Sense8, or even the American Psycho musical, because it's just making me want to go watch those works of art instead of this series. But nonetheless, I cannot fault the soundtrack selection. How could I? These are all certified bops. But the most unexpected, delightful surprise I had when watching this show was when I got to episode 5. And they introduced a character who only appears briefly in the entire series. The character was called Bob Guccione, the founder of Penthouse magazine. So they show this man, and I'm looking at him closely, and I'm going, this face, I know this face is speaking to me, why do I know him? And then it hit me. I went, no, surely not. Is that Maxwell Caulfield. Now, if you have not been following along with my channel, or more than that, if you have not been following me on Twitter, then you won't know that I am a very, very loud supporter of Grease 2. It is the superior Grease film. I said what I said. I once tweeted that Michael Carrington would never hurt me because it's true. And do you know who played Michael Carrington? Maxwell Caulfield! It was truly a Gordon Ramsay, finally some good fucking food moment, because I was growing increasingly annoyed with the way the show was addressing or not addressing certain subject matter. And then I finally got a reprieve because they showed me Maxwell Caulfield, and I got to go to my happy place of remembering how much I love Grease 2 and how sweet Michael Carrington was to Stephanie Zanoni.
Actually, I think you're kind of terrific.
Get out of here.
Yes! And how Johnny Nogarelli is the man Danny Zuko could never be.
Oh?
And how Paulette in those gold trousers was a cultural reset. Imagine if Tab Hunter was your high school teacher. Ugh.
Now, what is the best time of the month for a woman to conceive?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Some people's lives are just privileged in ways I will never be able to touch. 2022, we're going to finally get into the Grease films. Life is too short. I have decided we need to have this conversation. The world needs to know. Whoa, whoa, I gotta go back to school. Again! Anyway, Maxwell Caulfield, you deserve better. You were ahead of your time. Michael became a cool writer for Stephanie, but all the while she also fell for him, for all the great things he already had going for him. That's character growth for both of them. I want what they have. Anyway, stay tuned because there's a lot about Pam and Tommy that I did not discuss in this review simply because of time. We can probably get into more details once I presumably move forward with doing episodic reviews. So if people are interested, we can do that. I can probably get a spoiler-free review getting into more specifics about the first 3 episodes, and I can try to post that sometime this weekend. So Pam and Tommy will begin releasing new episodes to stream on Hulu starting next week, and Grease 2 will continue to stream in my heart.
Mo first time.
See you in a few days, maybe, possibly, probably. Bye.